Most people misunderstand the idea of becoming dangerous. They imagine aggression, conflict, dominance. But those things are usually signs of the opposite: lack of control. Real danger does not look dramatic. It rarely raises its voice. It rarely needs attention. Real danger is quiet, because the most dangerous person in any room is the one who does not need to prove anything. A man who must constantly show strength is usually compensating for something missing. True strength behaves differently. It observes, it waits, it decides carefully. This difference is subtle, but important, because aggression and danger are not the same thing. Aggression is loud. It reacts quickly. It seeks confrontation. Danger, on the other hand, is controlled. It understands consequences. It understands timing. It understands restraint. And restraint requires strength. Anyone can act impulsively. Anyone can lose control. Anyone can react emotionally. But remaining composed under pressure, that requires discipline. It requires awareness of your own impulses, awareness of your emotions, awareness of the situation around you. And most people never develop that awareness because it demands something uncomfortable: honesty. Honesty about your fears, honesty about your weaknesses, honesty about the parts of yourself you would rather ignore, the parts capable of harm. Every human being carries those parts: capacity for anger, capacity for destruction, capacity for force. Ignoring that capacity does not remove it. It only leaves it uncontrolled. And uncontrolled force is dangerous in the worst way: chaotic, unpredictable. The Stoics understood something many people avoid. Strength must be acknowledged before it can be disciplined. You cannot control impulses you pretend do not exist. You cannot govern emotions you refuse to examine. So the first step toward becoming dangerous is not action. It is awareness. Awareness of what you are capable of. Awareness of where your limits actually are. Awareness of the parts of your character that still require discipline. Because once you see those things clearly, you gain the ability to shape them. And shaping your own character is where real strength begins. Not suppressing your nature, not pretending weakness is virtue, but learning to command the forces inside you. Anger becomes focus. Fear becomes awareness. Pressure becomes discipline. And when a person reaches that point, their presence changes. They move with control. They speak with intention. They do not react impulsively because they understand something most people never learn. Power without control is weakness. But controlled power is what makes someone truly dangerous. Once a person understands the difference between aggression and danger, another challenge appears: facing their own capability. Most people never do this, not because they lack strength, but because the idea of their own power makes them uncomfortable. They prefer seeing themselves as harmless, predictable, safe. It feels morally correct, even virtuous. But harmlessness is not the same as virtue. Virtue requires choice. Harmlessness often comes from lack of ability. A person who cannot cause damage is not demonstrating restraint. They are simply limited. Real restraint only exists when capability is present. This is why disciplined people develop strength before they emphasize control. They build capacity, physical capacity, mental capacity, the ability to endure pressure, the ability to remain calm in conflict, the ability to act when action becomes necessary. But this stage creates internal tension, because capability changes how you see yourself. You begin recognizing your potential for force, your ability to disrupt situations, your ability to resist pressure. For many people, that realization is unsettling. They worry about misusing it. They worry about becoming someone they dislike. So they avoid developing that capacity entirely. But avoiding strength does not create morality. It creates fragility. Because a fragile person cannot protect themselves. They cannot defend others. They cannot withstand pressure when it arrives. And pressure always arrives eventually. Life does not remain peaceful forever. Situations become difficult. People become hostile. Decisions become complicated. In those moments, harmlessness provides no protection. Only capability does. Capability combined with discipline. That combination is where controlled danger appears. A person who can act but chooses restraint. A person who can push back but understands timing. A person who does not fear conflict, yet does not seek it. This balance is difficult to develop. It requires self-observation. It requires discipline. It requires repeated exposure to pressure. But once it exists, fear begins to lose its control over you. Because fear often comes from uncertainty. Uncertainty about what you are capable of doing. Uncertainty about how you would respond. Capability removes much of that uncertainty. You begin trusting your ability to handle difficult situations, to remain steady when pressure rises, to make decisions when others hesitate. And once that confidence appears, something inside you becomes difficult to control. Not your behavior, your independence. Because a person who understands their own capability is far less likely to submit to pressure. And that is what makes them dangerous. If this message resonates with you, like and subscribe for more content like this. This channel is built for people who are done waiting. Once capability appears, another problem emerges. The cost of using it. Strength changes how you move through the world. Not because you become aggressive, but because you become less willing to tolerate what is wrong. And that shift creates tension. Situations you once ignored become difficult to ignore. Pressure that once controlled you becomes easier to resist. Expectations that once guided you begin to feel optional. This is where the real cost appears. Because independence rarely makes life simpler. It often makes it harder. People expect agreement. People expect cooperation. People expect predictability. When those expectations disappear, reactions follow. Confusion, resistance, sometimes even hostility. Not because others are malicious, but because predictable behavior makes systems stable. And unpredictable people disrupt stability. A person who can refuse pressure introduces uncertainty. A person who can walk away changes the dynamic. A person who cannot be quietly directed becomes difficult to manage. This is why independence often creates distance. Some relationships begin to shift. Some expectations begin to break. Some paths begin to separate. Many people encounter this moment and turn back because the pressure feels heavy. Remaining agreeable feels easier. Remaining predictable feels safer. Remaining harmless restores stability. So they soften their position. They adjust their behavior. They return to what others expect. And slowly, the edge disappears again. The independence fades. The capability remains unused. But for the few who continue forward, something else develops. Tolerance for solitude, not isolation, but the ability to stand without constant approval. The ability to hold a position even when others disagree. The ability to remain steady when pressure increases. This is where disciplined strength becomes visible, not through aggression, not through dominance, through stability. A person who does not bend easily. A person who does not panic under pressure. A person who does not abandon principles for comfort. That kind of presence changes environments because people instinctively recognize it. Someone who cannot be easily moved. Someone who cannot be quietly shaped. Someone capable of acting when necessary. And that capability carries weight. Not because it is displayed, but because it exists. And once it exists, the world begins responding to you differently.
There is a point
Where strength stops being theory and becomes responsibility. Up until this moment, most of the work has been internal. Discipline, awareness, control, learning how to manage your own impulses, learning how to tolerate pressure, learning how to stand independently. But eventually a situation appears where those lessons are tested. A moment where remaining silent is easier, but wrong. A moment where stepping forward creates friction, where resistance carries consequences. And this is where character reveals itself, because strength without action has little value. Principles without behavior are only ideas. Anyone can claim discipline. Anyone can claim courage. Anyone can claim independence until pressure appears. Pressure forces a decision. Act or retreat. Speak or remain silent. Most people retreat, not because they lack intelligence, but because consequences feel heavy. Conflict may appear. Reputation may shift. Relationships may change. Those possibilities create hesitation. But hesitation has its own cost. Every time a person abandons their principles, something inside them weakens. Not visibly, but internally. Confidence fades. Self-trust erodes. Decision-making becomes uncertain because the mind remembers compromise. It remembers the moment you stepped back. This is why disciplined people act when action becomes necessary, not recklessly, not emotionally, but deliberately. They understand that avoiding every conflict creates weakness. Avoiding every responsibility creates fragility. So when the moment arrives, they move. Even if the situation becomes uncomfortable, even if pressure increases, because maintaining integrity matters more than maintaining comfort. Integrity is what stabilizes character. It aligns action with principle. It removes internal contradiction. And when that alignment exists, confidence becomes natural. Not loud confidence, not performative confidence, quiet confidence. The kind that comes from knowing your actions follow your standards. That kind of person becomes difficult to manipulate, difficult to pressure, difficult to control, because they are not governed by fear of discomfort. They are governed by judgment, and judgment, guided by discipline, is what turns capability into controlled danger. By the time someone reaches this point, something fundamental has changed. Not outwardly, but internally. They no longer measure their decisions by comfort or by approval. They measure them by principle. What is correct? What is necessary? What is aligned with their standards? This shift may appear small, but it changes everything. Because a person guided by principle becomes difficult to influence. Pressure loses its leverage. Approval loses its power. Not because the person rejects others, but because their direction no longer depends on them. They listen. They consider advice. They remain aware of consequences. But the final decision remains their own. And that independence creates a different kind of presence. A presence that does not bend easily. A presence that does not panic under pressure. A presence that does not abandon principles for convenience. People sense that stability, even without explanation, even without confrontation, because there is a quiet difference between someone who must comply and someone who could refuse. That difference is where real danger exists. Not violence, not aggression. Capability combined with restraint, the ability to act without the need to act, the ability to confront pressure without becoming controlled by it. That balance is rare, because developing it requires discipline. It requires responsibility. It requires honesty about your own nature, your impulses, your fears, your potential for both creation and destruction. Acknowledging those forces is uncomfortable, but denying them leaves you powerless. The Stoics understood something simple. Strength must be governed, but it must exist first. Without strength, restraint is meaningless. Without capability, virtue is untested. That is why disciplined people build both, capability and control. Together they form something uncommon, a person who cannot be easily directed, a person who cannot be quietly shaped, a person who cannot be controlled by pressure. Not because they seek conflict, but because they are prepared for it. That preparation is what makes someone dangerous. Dangerous in the most disciplined sense. If this message resonated with you, like the video and subscribe. The discipline of building that strength never truly ends,